Technologies that can remove carbon from the atmosphere are moving from concept to deployment. But can they scale fast enough to make the significant impact on climate change? And what role can carbon markets play in enabling these innovations? Today, we are diving into technology-based carbon dioxide removal and how carbon markets can help unlock the scale needed in global climate action. Welcome to Carbon Markets Now, bringing you timely discussions with key players across the carbon market landscape and exploring the policies, tools, and innovations that are shaping the future of international cooperation on climate action. My name is Kazuhisa Koakutsu. I'm the director of Article 6 Implementation Partner Center, known as A6IP. In this episode, we are focusing on technology-based carbon dioxide removal and the role of carbon markets in driving this innovation. Joining us today are two experts in carbon dioxide removal technologies. Paolo Piffaretti, co-founder and CEO at ClimeFi. Alvin Lee, head of supply at Puro.earth. Thanks for joining us. And both companies are deeply engaged with innovating in the tech-based carbon dioxide removal and developing linkages with carbon markets. Welcoming both for today's Carbon Market Now. First, we'll unpack key aspects of technology-based carbon dioxide removal. Then, spotlight the perspectives and initiatives for our guests. Global climate action focuses primarily on emission reductions or preventing greenhouse gases from being released into the atmosphere. Rapid and deep emission reductions are absolutely necessary to addressing climate change. However, even large emission reductions alone are no longer enough to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius goals of the Paris Agreement. Significant volumes of carbon dioxide also needed to be pulled directly out of the atmosphere. This is where technology-based carbon dioxide removals are positioned to be a key contributor to global climate goals. Technology-based carbon dioxide removal refers to solutions that use engineered industrial processes to take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it, often for centuries or even longer. This includes innovations like direct air capture, enhanced rock weathering, and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. The scale-up of technology-based carbon dioxide removals like these often faces barriers like high cost and intensive energy demand. Logistical hurdles can also be substantial, involving securing vast land and water resources and necessary infrastructure, depending on the project type. And deployment must be done with strong safeguards in place. Carbon markets can be a crucial enabler for deploying high-tech carbon dioxide removal. These markets, both voluntary and compliance, including those under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, can create financial incentives for investment in carbon removal technologies, while creating robust, credible markets and ensuring effective scaling remain common challenge. These mechanisms represent an opportunity to unlock an investment and innovation required to meet global climate targets. So now, turn to our guests. Let's start with the big picture of technology-based carbon dioxide removal in climate action. So Alvin, as Puro.earth is the first creating program dedicated to this engineered carbon removal. I'd like to ask you to describe the key criteria for a technology-based carbon dioxide removal method, like durability, additionality, verification, and safeguards, to qualify as a high quality and earn CO2 removal certificates, in short, COX. So please, Alvin.
Thank you very much, Kazuhisa, for having me on this program. So regarding your question about engineered carbon removal. So first and foremost, when we consider whether methodology can be considered for such, we have to look at, does that methodology directly lower CO2 concentration in the atmosphere? And as you mentioned, there's various techniques for that. Some techniques directly will, you can say, interact with the atmosphere to try to reduce the concentration of CO2, such as what you said, direct air capture and then storage. But we also look at what we call indirect methods. So indirect method would be, for example, you first utilize the action of nature. So the plants are naturally capturing CO2, but where the engineering comes in is, how do we make sure that the CO2 that's captured by plants into a tree or into agricultural plant, how do we make sure that CO2 is captured and stabilized and stored for a very long period of time? So that's what we call something indirect. Let the plants do the work first, and then we use engineering to stabilize the CO2 and then store that for a long, long time. You also mentioned about durability. So in the case of the market we operate in today for engineered carbon removal, at a very minimum, we're looking for techniques where once the carbon dioxide is captured, that it can be stably stored for minimum 1 century. But most of the methodologies we're looking at, usually the expected durability is at least several centuries. And as you mentioned, quite a few actually, because of the way they operate, whether it's injecting CO2 into subsurface or locking CO2 into minerals, the expected durability would be thousands of years. So that's the kind of timescales we are generally looking at when we evaluate different methodologies. I can also say nowadays we like to talk about looking for methodologies relating to land, air, and sea. So leveraging different parts of of nature to either store the CO2 on land or below the land, of course, directly interacting with the air, or even exploring how can we safely store CO2 in various forms within the sea. So we're looking at all these different approaches. And the very important thing is that we always look at the science. So we check what is understood and generally accepted amongst the scientific community. It's very important to have interaction with the global community through working groups, through studying papers and peer-reviewed research to make sure that a methodology we're considering has broad acceptance in the market. Assuming there are such techniques, it is also very important that you can practically measure the activity. So you mentioned about MRV. So yes, whatever the method, whether it's biochar or direct air capture or BECCS or ERW, there has to be a clear way of how will we confirm that the activity happened. And then finally, regarding safeguards, nowadays it's quite well captured by the core carbon principles and ICVCM, and so we are strongly guided by these. So making sure that whatever the activity is, that there are environmental and social safeguards, there's been stakeholder engagement, and of course additionality is one of the core carbon principles. So to make sure that a project actually needed carbon financing for the overall project to work. So all these elements are important in engineered carbon removal.
Thank you, Alvin. I think providing the clarity on high quality standard is very essential for the market. And also, you mentioned several important things. And particularly, I think the science is really important to really guide us. And I think these aspects are really something I really reminded importance for the carbon dioxide removals. So, Paolo, let's turn to ClimeFi. ClimeFi helps corporate buyers build durable carbon removal portfolios. How do you view the current supply-demand imbalance for the engineered carbon removal credits? And what clear market signal would accelerate deployment at scale? Paolo, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And no, so I think there is an imbalance, but I think it's one that maybe is misunderstood. Today, if we look at the market, there is a growing amount of supply of engineered carbon removal projects coming into line, issuing credits through the likes of Puro.earth. The imbalance, I would say, is more actually on the demand side. Today, there's only a handful of corporate buyers that are meaningfully engaging with the available supply, which means that at this stage, I would say that the imbalance is rather on the demand side rather than the supply side, supply front. That is, of course, a delicate imbalance, I would say, because, as mentioned, the pool of buyers today is quite restricted. Should we see a switch switch in interest, or let's say a higher demand signal, that imbalance would dramatically shift towards supply constraints. Because at the end of the day, also if we look at the overall pool of supply being available, although that grows on a yearly basis, it is still restrained. So that's for a first perspective that I believe it is very important to understand. And when we talk to buyers and corporate organizations, what we tell them is that today this is a demand or a buyer's market, because the imbalance is more greatly felt on the buy side rather than the supply side. And that also, just for further context, can be used as an advantage for early buyers. Now, if we take a step back, I believe all of that is due to the fact that right now, despite the scientific base on which we rest to justify the existence of engineered carbon removal technologies, do lack a bit of a raison d'être, as we say in French, in a sense that there are only a handful of countries that formally recognize these as compensation or counterbalancing mechanism. Legislation is ramping up to catch up for that, but it is not there yet. And if we look at the world today, leading the way, of course, is Europe, but we're also seeing other countries, the likes of the United Kingdom, but also, for instance, in Japan, in Asia Pacific, you would have Japan. But what would for this to shift, for a greater demand signal to happen, what we would need is greater policy enforcement mechanisms adopted across wider markets to help organizations rationalize the investment, the funding of these technologies, for buyers to be able to say, now that it is imposed on me and I need to take care of my carbon externalities, I will therefore start investing and looking at how to mitigate my carbon externalities in a manner that is aligned with global regulations, or my at least national regulations.
Thank you, Paolo, for sharing your insights into the market signals in this space. And you're mentioning about demand side is important. I also see this is a very important point. Particularly like a buyer side, and maybe you can also look into this later. And I also see many countries are developing kind of guidelines for removals. They also take into account how they can utilize these. So yeah, I really see this is important areas where the users and buyers could be looking into. Let's shift a little bit and focus on the intersection of engineered carbon removal and international compliance markets, specifically Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So, Alvin, when considering scaling the use of engineered carbon removal credits as internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, known as ITOMOS in the Article 6 language. In the context of this Article 6, what are the biggest challenges, opportunities you foresee? Please tell us.
Thank you, Kazuhisa. So regarding challenges and opportunities, starting with challenges, at the moment, we think there could be better clarity on whether a carbon removal activity is either inside or outside of a country's nationally determined contribution, or NDC. I think that could be further clarified. And also, there's still work to be done, we perceive, on would there be authorizations given for corresponding adjustments, for example. Assuming these challenges can be met, there are also some perceived challenges about, even if we see this activity happen, will it be stable? If something is put in an inventory or there's authorization granted, could there somehow be a retroactive shift, which would create perceived uncertainties in the market? There's also some question about how additionality works in the case of Article 6 and CDR, or carbon dioxide removals, because normally when we talk about additionality, we're thinking about, is a project additional? Does it need that carbon financing to work? Whereas here, we perceive that the thinking's a little bit different in that if we have these activities, does it raise ambition between the different countries that are involved? So those are some challenges we perceive. But however, definitely there's opportunities. We think if those challenges can be addressed and clarified convincingly, then you can support the integrity of the Paris mechanism. And that's really important. And this gives us an opportunity to enhance legal understanding and stability, get the accounting right, and everything that supports that. That's a great opportunity. Also, we would observe that although Article 6 right now, we think, is focused a lot on countries helping one another to reduce emissions, but it is a great opportunity to include some portion of carbon removal within even now within these activities, because that will raise ambition, that will create a demand signal for these new technologies, because ultimately these solutions are needed. Just to use a round number, if everything goes well, most experts would agree that there's likely still to be 10 billion tons per year of residual emissions, what people refer to as hard to abate emissions. So we need every kind of catalyst to start building those solutions now. So if they can be addressed through Article 6 mechanism in some manner, even fractionally, it's really, really good. Now, we understand that cost is an issue. Yes, I probably should have mentioned cost is a challenge, because cost of negative emissions technologies today are more expensive than, for example, nature-based removal, such as reforestation, and certainly much more expensive than most emission reduction solutions. But if you get the demand right, we can drive scale and start to bring the cost down. And a lot of people would also highlight that, certain kinds of emission reductions, in fact, are very expensive. And you may find that using a carbon removal can be a very practical solution. One example people talk about a lot is aviation fuel, right? Eventually, it may, in fact, be very useful to continue to use some level of conventional fuel, but then use carbon removal to address that. That may be effective economically, and it is actually talked about even in the ICAO pathways. So these are the things that we see on the challenge and opportunity-wise, and that's what keeps Puro energized, trying to work on these.
Thank you, Alvin, for sharing those challenges and opportunities. And I think many, of course, challenges like cost or maybe NDCs, as we see as various NDCs there, and also authorization under Article 6. But it is really true that a lot of these kind of addressing these could kind of create more opportunities. So I think enhancing NDC requires more reductions, including removals, and that also requires more technologies. And so I personally also true kind of a believer of these removals play a very important role. So I think together, maybe we can see these kind of opportunities to realize. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing those perspectives. So Paolo, on that note, ClimeFi recently structured a pilot Itomos transfer under Article 3.2, which is very first time, especially in this space for engineered carbon removals on between Norway and Switzerland. So please tell us about this process and biggest lessons learned and how could it shape future carbon dioxide removal projects under the Article 6. Paolo, please.
Thank you. No, and I would say this was probably one of last year's highlights for us, in our pursuit of rationalizing the procurement and again, the financing of these technologies. We need to provide our corporate buyers with the mean to be able to properly recognize these credits that they purchase, especially if they purchase them at a premium today. And so here, I mean, this was for us. It was quite a unique setting. One of the, if I, thinking back of the conversation you were having with Alvin is, for us right now, there are no collective mechanisms for these inter-exchanges to happen. And a lot of, if organizations are going to be willing to invest in these technologies, they need to make sure that there exists proper channels for these inter-exchanges to happen. And here, what we were able to do is bring together a cohort of organizations that were willing to work jointly with the public instances at the Swiss and Norwegian level for these events, for this inter-exchange to happen. And maybe again, just to also maybe help the broader public to understand our perspective, really to the market-based perspective. For us, the Article 6 are to be understood as just a channel, a means for a formal transfer from a point A to point B to happen, and then corresponding adjustments to happen so that, going back to your point, Alvin, that, there's no additionality issues. And so that's kind of the perspective we were having. What we learned is that given that there is a lack of existing infrastructure here, all the stakeholders of this initiative needed to have or adopt a certain entrepreneurial mindset. So even the organizations, once they started signing these offtake agreements, the purchase agreements with the suppliers, and then, in the context of this Article 6 transaction, certain components of how the transfer would happen were yet to be decided and were left as a variable that can be adapted later down the route. So I would say first it's this entrepreneurial, agile mindset that is needed, as long as we don't have a collective approach to tackling or a collective mechanism to tackle this transfer to happen. And then here I would say it's also lesson learned is for me is definitely also the relationship that we were able to have with the public instances. None of that could have happened had we not had a responding government, the Department of Environmental Affairs, that together with us thought through the process, iterated, and then worked jointly with the Norwegian government. So but if you have all these components aligned, and if you have willing parties that are aligned, that certain elements will need to be agile, what I realize is that it is actually not a huge mountain to climb. These Article 6 transactions can be easily set up once you have a clear understanding and you have willing parties. And it is something that that can be now easily replicated. And, case in point for us, we are already working on subsequent Article 6 type of deals that would not only be based on Norway and Switzerland, but also other countries. So that's something that for us, if I think in terms of what we expect out of this year, is further types of other types of, or more types of these deals to happen.
Yeah, thank you, Paolo. I think since Article 6 actual implementation operation is also still early stage, so it's really encouraging to hear that you started actual transactions through Itomos, and also you mentioned that it could be also happen to other countries, and also could be possible. So I think showing these actual real cases really kind of pushes others. And I also like we need a really kind of entrepreneurship because this is a new area. But at the same time, we really need more really buyers coming to. So on this note, just can I just follow up on the ClimeFi's put a strong emphasis on the buyers first business model and avoiding conflicts of interest with suppliers. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how this approach, including the use of your analytics ratings, provides a distinct advantage to corporates navigating a complex this engineered carbon removal market?
Absolutely. And just one thing, I just wanted to bounce back on a little component, but going back to the opportunities of this Article 6, and I'll get to the buyers first and why we do this. But just for everyone to know, the typical sales cycle or procurement cycle for investors or corporate buyers to envisage buying engineered carbon removals ranges from 12 months to 24 months. So it's typically a lengthy process because, again, high greedy premiums. These are complex technologies that are hard at this stage to rationalize, but something that dramatically changed once we enforced the Article 6, or we set up the Article 6 transaction mechanism and this initiative, is that it took us 3 months to bring some of Switzerland's biggest corporate buyers on board from the moment they knew that the government would endorse these credits. And so that's something that we really look forward to. I think it will really accelerate the pace at which this industry works right now. So that's an important note I wanted to share here also with the community. And to your point, why do we have this buyer focus approach? First, it stems from the people that built ClimeFi, myself included. Most of the team members here were previous corporate buyers, people that were convinced about the use of these technologies and their needs, but needed help in rationalizing the costs, in rationalizing the technologies to their board, to their C-levels and investors. And for this rationalization to happen, what you need are partners that you can trust, that will provide you with the accurate data, that you can trust will not bias the result based on their own interests. And so for us, if given that our mission is to make sure that CDR become a critical global recognized asset, it was important that we adhere to these strict principles, that we provide a completely independent approach to helping buyers rationalize the procurement of these technologies. So what it means for us is that we never receive fees from any suppliers. We never invest or take part in these suppliers as well, and we continuously we share unfettered access to the data that we've collected. Because we believe that for buyers to feel comfortable with a certain project, they need to be able to contextualize the information that they have. So they need to have a broad picture, and they need to make sure that and they need to have access to the picture without having any reserves on it, or any reserves that would be used against them. Typically, when people ask me what we're trying to solve here for buyers, for me, it's the information asymmetry. It's the fact that certain parties exploit the lack of visibility, the complexity of the market to try to maximize their short-term gains, which again we're really trying to avoid here. So all in all, sharing back to as to why we decided to do this. We did this because we wanted this market to grow exponentially. We wanted a broader spectrum of buyers to invest in it. And for that, we felt we needed to adhere to a very strict approach on how to solve for that.
Thank you, Paolo. I think your also additional kind of explanation about Article 6 really push this pilot it almost go through. I think that was a really encouraging kind of experience that I also hear. And also your buyers first approach. I also see like more quality data, quality information that really drives buyers to move into this again kind of a complex field. So I think I see really the value of your approach and your presence to make this happen. So
And if I might add a little point, and thank you very much, is and also if that, to be targeted to a broader audience, also potential suppliers, we serve some of the world's biggest corporate buyers engaging now in the carbon removal ecosystem. We manage close to 0.5 megaton of durable carbon dioxide removal certificates. Is that buyers, it's not a question of, projects not having any risks or projects being expensive that withholds buyers from engaging with these suppliers. What impedes buyers to engage with suppliers, to engage with these different technologies, is the lack of information, is the opacity. And so typically what we're telling our suppliers is when we work with them is the more information we provide them, the more transparent we are, even about some of the issues that they may have, the more willing corporate buyers will be. Because once they know what the issues are, they know how to mitigate for it. There's also, from a contractual perspective, there's different mechanisms that you can set in place. But it's a fact of knowing that then gives them the reassurance that they are evolving in a known space and that therefore they can best accommodate for it or adapt for it.
Thank you for those additional importance of kind of information needs to be much more transparent and communicative, and that's something we really wanted to ensure. And I think a related topic, I also just wanted to move on to the Alvin Pro.earth has recently expanded to include new carbon dioxide removal methods like marine anoxic carbon storage, something I also like to understand more better about this. But please tell us about this new methodology and how you ensure new technology meet scientific rigor, which is something we also talked about, and permanence requirements. Again, this is also very important area to meet before they scale. So, Alvin, please tell us about this new topic.
Thank you, Kazuhisa. Let me explain the context of some of the recent new methodologies we had, like what you mentioned. But starting with the history, so since 2019, we had focused on a number of more land and air-oriented carbon removal technologies, including biochar, terrestrial storage of biomass, carbonated materials, direct air capture, and also bioenergy with CCS. So that was our focus for some years. Then I want to also highlight enhanced rock weathering, which you mentioned. Enhanced rock weathering is interesting because we're using minerals on land to capture CO2 from the air when it rains. But the important thing about enhanced rock weathering is that once the capture happens, you get carbonates and bicarbonates as a result. And eventually they wash to the ocean. So you can say enhanced rock weathering is a blend of land and sea, actually. So now this brings us to what we did last year. So last year we had a big push to try to explicitly look at how could we store CO2 in forms which are safe to put into the ocean. So last year was the big marine CDR or MCDR year for Puro. So we launched 3 different methodologies where we looked at how to leverage the ocean as a sink, but in a safe manner. So regardless of the methods, which I will briefly mention, integrity and safety is paramount. So we must, again, like I mentioned earlier, we must work with the scientific community to make sure that whatever these methods are, that there is consensus that it could be done with the right kinds of environmental and social safeguards. Furthermore, there has to be some way to measure these. So let me briefly then talk about what were the three that we identified to launch for marine CDR last year. So the first one is what you mentioned, marine anoxic carbon storage. What that means is it's a methodology where you look at certain parts of the ocean where there's very low or no oxygen. So that's hence the word anoxic. And in those parts of the ocean, you can store certain kinds of biomass and they would degrade very slowly or essentially are inert. And there are certain kinds of biomass you can put into these parts of the ocean which work out, usually some kind of woody biomass, for example. But that was the one that you referred to, which we launched, I think, first half of 2025. We also launched something called direct air capture, but with ocean storage. So this was a technique where you're working on land first using chambers, manipulating seawater and using minerals. Eventually, you trap CO2 from the air inside the chamber. But again, the results are these carbonates and bicarbonates, which can then be safely stored into the ocean. Similar, actually, as enhanced rock weathering, but using like a controlled system. And then the one that we did at the late part of 2025 was something called microalgae carbon fixation and sinking, MCFS. Again, this one is leveraging the action of phytoplankton. They trap CO2, but when they reach a critical mass and activity, they sink to the bottom of the ocean. And so these are three MCDR techniques we explored last year. Each has different kind of measurement requirements, and we're very excited to work with the project development community this year to essentially implement those new methodologies.
Thank you, Alvin, for introducing those new ideas, especially like a marine CDR is something, is a new kind of idea, at least for me, for like a traditional carbon market kind of space. We look into mostly like renewable energy efficiency, and gradually nature-based through forestry. But now we are more talking about new areas, such as, of course, DACs, direct air capture and storage, and also this new area of marine and the weathering. That also see is a new area. So again, looking forward to see those developments. But at the same time, I also hearing that scientific rigor is really important for this type of novel methodologies that ensuring the high integrity carbon market. So thank you very much, Alvin, for really updating us in terms of new developments in those areas. So let's shift to the our final topic and look ahead to the future of this technology-based carbon dioxide removal. So Paolo, drawing on ClimeFi experience working in both voluntary and compliance carbon markets, what is the single most impactful public policy decisions, again, public policy decisions, that government could implement now to best support the future growth? Again, we see a lot of challenges, but same time we see opportunities of this engineered carbon removals market. So Paolo, please.
Thank you. I think without a single doubt, it would be to formally recognize durable carbon dioxide removal technologies as sole means to counterbalance fossil fuel emissions or fossil fuel residual emissions, if we adhere to the like-for-like approach. So giving the corporate buyers the clear signal that there is only one way to counterbalance the residual emissions, and that is with durable carbon removal technologies. That would send a shockwave and would urge all organizations, of course, to start looking at the ways they can start securing and building their streams of carbon removal credits to consistently counterbalance, compensate their residual emissions.
Thank you very much, Paolo, for very kind of straightforward answers. And I see the kind of very kind of strong policy signals, especially this area for removals to countermeasure fossil fuels is very essential. And maybe this is something we need to really communicate with more broader public policy space in many parts of the world. So now, Alvin, looking ahead of maybe 5 to 10 years, what are the key innovations or technologies-based breakthroughs that you believe are essential for engineered carbon removal to become a scalable key component of global net zero strategies? So please, Alvin.
Thank you, Kazuhisa. So as I mentioned at Puro, we are very much driven by the vision that there needs to be a multi-billion tons capacity in carbon removal. It's a utility that we strongly believe is needed to coexist alongside what we normally think of as utilities. And so the way we think about it is that indeed there are highly likely to be new innovations and technologies and scientific breakthroughs that will bring some new methodologies. We definitely would anticipate there would be some of these. It could be a very novel new kind of material or a new kind of capture process, or it could be novel ways to leverage microorganisms. Like I mentioned, one of the recent methods we had was using microalgae. So we do anticipate these will happen. But equally important, or maybe even more important, in the next 5 to 10 years, a big part of what we see as a breakthrough is actually in what we think of as infrastructure build-out. So taking what we already know can work, like the methodologies that we've talked about, but now getting the infrastructure to build these so that their capacity is millions of tons, and you would have thousands of such facilities. So when you add it up, you'd have billions of tons of capacity for the world. So building infrastructure, of course, means financing, but it's also a lot of logistics and operational know-how. So maybe people don't talk about this. It's not as exciting maybe as a scientific breakthrough, but in fact, we view it as absolutely critical to reach a billion-ton scale kind of capacity. Just to share with you a few examples. So today we already have many conventional utilities out there: bioenergy production, biogas production, and even biofuels production. So these already exist. And why do I mention these? All three of these, as kind of an output, in fact, is they're releasing CO2 that originally came from wood chips or organic materials, right? We're getting energy by processing those, but we're releasing the CO2 that was already trapped within the plants or the animal waste. And so right now there's a big push to how do we build the infrastructure that actually helps us capture that treasure. Right? CO2 released from organic material is a treasure. Right now we lose a lot of it back to the atmosphere. So we think a lot of activity will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, to capture that clean CO2, if we can call it this, or biogenic CO2. And then you need to build the infrastructure to move that captured CO2 and then store it somewhere. It could be injecting underground, which is what most people think about as CCS, or subterranean storage, but it could also be trapped into a solid form on land. So a lot of this infrastructure build out we see is absolutely critical. And there's also, I should mention, in farming and timber industries, there's a lot of waste from agricultural waste and forestry waste. That material is very valuable. People are using it sometimes for bioenergy production, but oftentimes that material is not used at all. In a way, it's wasted. So a big part of what we see as important in the next 10 years is how to mobilize the waste that's already out there, get the logistics to work where we can essentially stabilize the carbon that's already in that waste material and then make it very, very stable, centuries or more. And that would be a very important additional capacity of carbon removal. So that's just a quick rundown of some of the things we look at.
Thank you, Alvin, for sharing your insights and also kind of future areas where the scale could be enabled. And something I also, the infrastructure is very areas. And I learned that maybe existing infrastructure is something we could utilize as a way to storing CO2 maybe for centuries and more than those. And I think it's quite important. Also, questions for the policy as well, how to enabling those infrastructure to be built in a way to scale this very potential areas for the CDR. So again, thank you very much for sharing those insights. And again, thank you, Paolo and Alvin, for joining us for this very informative episode today. And I think you really highlighted how technology-based carbon removal is really an essential complement to deep emission cuts. And also we covered many important areas, challenges, experiences, and the future areas to go even more. So the scaling these solutions will require strong market signals and robust standards, transparency, and trust to attract the investment needed. So, and finally, international frameworks like Article 6 can play a pivotal role. And we also heard part from today how the Article 6 really push this new and innovative technologies. And especially for this global cooperation, for this scaling engineer removals, I think we need much more efforts through public policy as well as the market and investment, and also our future investment, especially into the infrastructure areas. So thank you very much, both again, for joining us today. I also learned many things, and I hope that our leaders, listeners, also enjoyed from today's episode. So to learn more about A6IP and Puro.earth and ClimeFi, please check the links in the description. So thank you for listening in, and join us next time to learn more about Article 6 and carbon market. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to this carbon market now, and follow A6IP for more insights into the evolving world of international carbon markets. So thank you very much, and see you soon.
I'll now provide a few key updates about Article 6 and carbon market. COP30 has formally strengthened the implementation of Article 6. This includes expanded capacity building support and the definitive closure of the Kyoto Protocol's Clean Development Mechanism. This effectively concludes the CDM era. In Europe, it was recently announced that member states may now utilize Article 6 credits to meet up to 5% of their emissions reduction targets for 2040. This development signals a path for high-integrity international credits to enter the European compliance space. There are also updates regarding domestic policies on Article 6. Bhutan has launched its Carbon Markets Framework 2025, and Chile has published the Supreme Decree No. 32 of 2024 in its National Gazette. Finally, the latest Article 6 Implementation Status Report now incorporates NDC 3.0 data for 129 parties. This provides our most comprehensive look to date at how nations are integrating market mechanisms into their new climate targets.